This session is more for Ben and Nathan to talk about Fabulate and what they do and whether you're interested in being involved in what they do as well. So I'll just give a little bit of a background to Ben and Nathan. So Nathan, he's a co-founder of Fabulate. He previously worked for IAB as the Australia Chair Video Council. I hope I got that right, Nathan. In the past, you've been a director of digital product sales at Nine Entertainment Group, and prior to that at Fairfax in business development and commercial partnerships.
That's it. Sounds like a lifetime away at this point.
And Ben, you are also the co-founder of Fabulate and Chief Revenue Officer. You're a digital sales director, or previously were at Nine Entertainment. You worked for Red Planet as a business development, and also at Fairfax Media, head of business development and commercial partnerships, where I imagine you would have met Nathan.
That's right. We've known each other for too long these days.
So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. It's great to have this time today with all you guys. So really appreciate you making the time, and thank you everyone for tuning in. But we've got the next. We've blocked out 2 hours, but I don't think we'll need that. We've got I think the next hour will probably be suffice for everyone. But we've pulled together a presentation, and Nathan and I really want to just talk to you a little bit more today about the title of today's presentation, which is Journalists, the Original Storysellers, and help and offer some advice based on our experiences on how you can tailor your pitching skills from editorial content, which you're probably all very familiar with, towards branded journalism. And by way of introduction, Fabulate, for those that don't know who we are, Fabulate is an online platform that helps connect amazing storytellers with brands that want amazing stories told. It also assists with streamlining the creation process and helping brands get their stories published across a number of well-known publishers. And like Susan said, my name's Ben Gunn. I've been in commercial publishing roles for 15 plus years, Fairfax and Nine the majority of the time, with my latest role being the sales director at Nine. And I've spent my career pitching to agencies, responding to branded content briefs, and teaching sales teams how to position branded content in order to have, the greatest chance of success. And Nathan, anything you want to add to your intro?
Yeah, not to bore you guys all on the silly long titles that they give you in publisher land, but I suppose the one difference that my career might have taken a little bit of a deviation from Ben's is, while I've always worked on the commercial side, I've worked a lot more on the commercial product side of things. And basically that's always come down from the fact of identifying opportunities, building them out for the sales team so that it can be nice and easily taken to market. So I get and I appreciate all the stress and the strain that it comes from pitching new products and taking your child to market for the first time. And
guys, also I encourage you to ask questions all the way through in this session. We've intentionally left space in the session for questions, and knowing the fact that you're all journalists, you probably will have some questions undoubtedly, and so feel free throughout the presentation to throw a question in there, and we'll be happy to answer anything that you guys have. But to kick off, maybe Nath, let's start with, I guess, just branded content as a term, because there's a lot that it's talked about a lot in market, but I think it's worth just clarifying what is branded content, and when people talk about branded content and branded journalism, what are the differences between these two?
Sorry, sorry, Nathan, before you go, there's a few people waiting in the waiting room that I can't let in because you're the host now. Is it possible to let them in?
Oh, how do I do that?
Down the bottom, it should say participants.
I might just stop my screen share for a second.
Do you want, I can reclaim the host for a sec. Sorry about that.
Oh, here we go. Yes. Admit.
Sorry, some people were just sending me messages to say they couldn't get in.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
No problems. if that happens at all, Susan, through the Prezzo, just let us know the session and we can just flick back and let people in. So that's fine.
Okay.
Is my screen still shared?
Yes.
No.
You're still the host.
You're not sharing your screen right now though, Nath.
Okay, one sec. Let me just get back into this. You'd think with all of the video calls that we've had to do in recent time, we'd be getting really good at it.
You can never rely on technology.
Everyone can see that screen now.
Yep.
Perfect.
We're up.
So Ben's question was around the definition of branded content. And while I definitely agree with what you said there, it is something that gets completely bandied about. But I look at it really simple. Branded content is just really any content that's produced on behalf of brands. And we use this slide that I've just got on the screen there just as a little bit of an example to kind of cover the breadth that clients actually have to or are required to produce to be able to deliver upon their communication challenges. This can be anything from blogs to white papers to opinion pieces to product descriptions to thought leadership pieces. It's essentially anything that solves a client query. And to further expand upon your question, Ben, there's really two types of content. There's brand journalism, which I think we'll all appreciate is much closely or resembles much more closely that of editorial, albeit it's still having that slight brand spin, and advertorial. Advertorial, I think we're all familiar with it as it's been around forever and a day, but brand journalism is that softly approach to selling. And I kind of look at it more like more informing than selling. And it definitely has more in common with editorial, with the exception of that being that the brand has commissioned it as opposed to an editor or a publisher.
And Nath, where would you see content, like the demand for brand journalism versus advertorial in this space? And is it 50-50? Like what do you see sort of trends today?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the fact that a lot more audience is a lot more skeptical these days. And I think that in order to get your message across, you need to add value, or you need to be much more subtle in how you're approaching things. So I would definitely see branded journalism as that particular, it would be more common than that of advertorial, but that doesn't mean that the advertorial doesn't have a place in today's society. I kind of always visualize all of these different things, like think about having your own toolkit, and it's just about bringing the right tools to the challenge and the solution you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think, you've touched on something that's really important there, because if you're the creator of content as well, understanding whether or not it needs to be brand journalism or advertorial is going to be really critical to the type of content that you write. And marketers will often dictate whether it needs to be one or the other, depending on where the potential customer will be in the life cycle. Because if they are getting closer to purchase, then sometimes advertorial is completely acceptable and what's required to get the job done. So
the other thing I would challenge that on as well is, because journalists or writers or copywriters are so close to the actual audience themselves in understanding what works, I'd almost encourage any creator to challenge the client as well. If you're being asked for an advertorial, or in the flip side is if you're being asked for a piece of brand journalism and you think it's the opposite is actually relevant for that point in time, feel free to do it, because I think at the end of the day, we're all in this together and we're all looking at things from slightly different views. So one of the things that always resonated with me, or something I was acutely aware of when I was in publisher land, is, and this might be something that's not obvious from the outside looking in, but the branded content process is just complicated. And I'd like to, I've put this slide up here for an example, but Ben, during your experience, what are some of the challenges that pop up through this process, and why do you think that it is so complicated? Is this by design, or is it just something that's happened that way?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to commercial content, it wouldn't have been intentionally designed to be as complicated as it is today. The emotional roller coaster that comes with content creation really is difficult for everyone who gets involved. And if you're not familiar with the publishing process, and you might not appreciate just how difficult it is on all sides of the coin. And we've got a number of creators on the call today, journalists on the call today, and so I'm sure you get involved at some point somewhere along the line with commercial content. But I guess the nuts and bolts of how it works on commercial publishing side is there's a lot of heavy lifting. And whether or not that starts with the client just telling the media agency that they want some content, and the agency reaching out to the salesperson or the sales rep, it's important to recognize that these conversations aren't just happening at one publisher. When a client asks an agency to do something, the agency is reaching out to 5 or 6 different publishers, and so this process is happening across 5 or 6 different publishers. And the sales rep then needs to engage internal teams. These internal teams aren't the creators themselves, and they're actually going to be briefing an internal branded content team, and that's the best case scenario. Depending on the size of the brief, sometimes because these branded content teams just don't have the time to help on all briefs, that it's just a salesperson working on this themselves. But they'll have to come up with the ideas, pull together the presentations. They'll often go through to editorial at some point to get the idea approved, but then the salesperson is pitching that back to the agency is pitching that to the client. And so the process is really extended. And that's before you've even won the pitch. There's a lot of work and a lot of lost work that goes through this process. And so it becomes a very expensive practice and very inefficient for everyone who's involved. And I think if you've been on the creator side before, when you have been briefed, you're very rarely speaking to the person who's requested the content in the first place. It's been filtered by 3, 4, 5 different teams before it gets to you.
What do you feel the risk there is of any idea by the time it goes through that process? How diluted does the idea become?
Well, that's one of the biggest problems, is that you're not speaking to the creator, you're not speaking to the subject matter expert, and by having to go through multiple channels, it is undoubtedly things get lost in translation, and the idea can be lost entirely.
So with that complex, like that process just seems unwieldy to begin with. What, in your time leading these sales teams, what did you see as the knock-on effects that this has to each of those stakeholders involved?
Yeah, unfortunately, because there's so much inefficiency in the system, everyone pays the price. And, and that's either creators, content studios, clients and agencies, or sales teams. And, if you're the creator, because there's so much cost with so much heavy lifting involved, you can often be expected to have to offer a lower rate as costs grow, and, eat into your own sort of fees as part of that process. Content studios, the hard part for them is there's so many deals in market, and they can be so intricate that, it's really difficult to be able to respond to all briefs, and so a lot of things just get missed and left up to the sales team. And from a client and agency perspective, you can get really frustrated because, the person who's creating the content, very rarely, if at all, are you ever in contact with them directly. So you're always passing it through multiple people, and your requests and the ideas are being lost. And then lastly, and this is the pain point that I've experienced in my career, is while it's great to be able to respond to branded content briefs and win those pitches, there was always a little bit of me that was reluctant to have the team push it as hard as some other products, because I just knew how long it took them out of market when they had to manage these branded content responses.
And managing, sorry, I'm just going through and admitting a few more people.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Typical me, can't do 2 things at once. As you go, as a stakeholder going through this process, how difficult is it to keep every one of these people engaged, on task, and actually negotiate it? Because it feels like it's not just one single hat that you need to wear at any point in time.
Yeah, well, look, depending on who you are, like on the sales side, it's very much, you know, you're not the expert storyteller yourself, and so sometimes you feel like you're putting forward some ideas that, you know, if you had direct access to a creator or a subject matter expert for the ideas, you know, you'd be putting a better response out, and so, you know, that can be really frustrating. But I think it's frustrating on all ends because you just know that the process is broken. But as individuals, it's very difficult to fix because it's such a big machine that sort of operates all together. And Nath, we've done our own research on this, so I think it'd be good to sort of share what have we uncovered as part of this commercial production process. That, you know, what are the real numbers in terms of how painful this is?
Yeah, this one's really close and near and dear to my heart because this is something I used to deal with both at Fairfax and at Nine to try to help a lot of the different teams as we launched a whole lot of new products. But what we found is using and I'll call it the old process, but it's actually, for a lot of people, it's still their current process. It takes about 45 days to publish a single piece of content, from the process of brief to pitch to win to sign off to actual, like the part that we showed on the slide before, that obviously only showed the pitching part, doesn't include the actual back and forth and the delivery of it. And what we found is when you're, you can have anywhere from 7 to 15 people involved in the end-to-end content creation process. Shouldn't surprise you that up to 140 plus emails can be sent. And I always have a chuckle at that one because, ironically, more content is actually written about the content in any of the body of those emails than the actual content itself. And then, because email is the most inefficient way to communicate everything, multiple phone calls are made where people come together on group calls, double checking everyone's agreed to everything and those kinds of things, just to be able to deliver on it. And then there's another piece of good research that we came across throughout that time. And basically it said that 25 cents of every dollar is wasted on inefficiency through that entire branded content process. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely prefer to see that extra 25 cents of every dollar reinvested back into content creation, because then you can actually see some return on that rather than that dead money that just gets thrown at broken processes.
I don't think you'd have a marketer arguing with the fact that like 25% of their budget back to spend on more content. So Nath, if this is as difficult and the process is unwielding as it is, you know, why do you think clients still focus so heavily on the branded content space?
I feel like I always have a chuckle at this one as well, as I feel like anyone that as a marketer needs to be a masochist in that sense, because they love the content so much and it works that they're still willing to go through that broken process. So we're obviously trying to help them solve and alleviate that, but it still continues to grow and it still continues to evolve. As much as 85% of marketers admit to already using content marketing in one way, shape or form, one of the people that I love to always look to for some sort of guidance is Keith Weed, who, you guys, if you don't know him, he's a well-known and renowned marketer, used to be the global CMO of Unilever, and he's a famous industry commentator. He's a big believer of this. So he is always encouraging businesses, any chance and any opportunity he gets to be able to pick up a microphone or appear in front of the press, to encourage people to not just create content, but create great content, create more of that great content and do it as fast and efficiently as possible. And what's also a really interesting number that's worthwhile all you guys being aware of is that in Australia, 23% of marketing budgets, that's total marketing budgets, is actually spent on some sort of branded content exercise. And the forecasts all seem to suggest that that number will continue to grow.
And that Marcus has made a good call out on the chat that, you know, the old adage of give me good, fast and cheap, pick any two. You know, do you think that given technology, given advancements, do you still think that applies today?
Look, I've got it. Like we were talking about this the other day, actually, and great storytelling is still great storytelling, whether you're doing it at a campfire or whether you're doing it in the newspaper or whether you're doing it on the internet. All that technology has done to storytelling is made it easier to get your message out there and get it out there faster. I do believe that we are at that point where you can have your cake and eat it too, and you don't need to just pick two out of those three. I think technology has come to that point, more so that it'll allow clients to be able to work through that necessarily than any journalist or creator. But I think that just gives a little bit of that support back to you guys so that you don't actually need to chase and have half your job actually delivering that content like it is with a lot of the content marketing teams at publishers. It's actually spent time on ideation and creation itself.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And then, okay, so then branded content as a category is pretty exciting because, you know, there's I guess you hear a lot about the Googles and the Facebooks and the growth that they're driving, you know, so where does branded content sit on the growth curve and compared to products that Google and Facebook offer?
Yeah, this one really excites me as well, and something that we should all be encouraged by. But the growth in branded content, it's actually the fastest digital, it's the fastest segment of digital advertising. So faster than search, faster than social, faster than video. And those are the three topics that everyone always talks about in sites about digital advertising. So I think we should all really feel confident and comfortable in that space. But what I thought was also worthwhile was to share some of the proof points when we're pitching and we're talking to clients to give them those the comfort that they are investing in the right areas. We share these on LinkedIn every time I come across something like this. So if you're looking for a source of good sound bites for client presentations or pitches, please follow along. There's always something that's being shared there. But here were the three ones that I picked up as the most common that I feel we're always talking about with clients. And it's that 58% of marketers identify original written content as the most important type of content. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but I look at the relatively low barrier to entry for production and the uplift that the content will give search engine discovery is probably the biggest reason for that. The next one is that B2B consumers view an average of 13 pieces of content before selecting a product. For B2C products, it's actually 11.4. So I think what that says is the consumer path to purchase has changed. So Ben, you're probably going to be unhappy about this one, but the old way would be to go and engage with a salesperson and find out all the information and then make your short list and then decide on a product. The way that we do it today is we probably do 85% of the research first. We work it down to one or two people, and then we engage a salesperson to kind of push us over that edge. So I think that is, if you're a marketer or a brand, and if you're not creating content for every one of those paths or those steps on your path to purchase, you're actually doing yourself a bit of a disservice in the modern world. And this one is a good one that we should all feel really comfortable about, and I think is one we should quote till the cows come home, is publishers, who I think we can all agree know a thing or two about growing large and engaging audiences. They identify blogs and articles as the most successful tactic for long-term site growth. And I think when you've got all the different things at your disposal that you can use for people to be going out and saying that the written word is so important and so centralized to what they do, I think is just really, really exciting. Sometimes what is it? Space Mountain. It's the oldest park in the ride at Disneyland, but it's still got the longest line. And I kind of look at the same way of that with the written word. And
Nath, we've talked or touched on, I guess, the Google and Facebook dominance, and you know, everyone who works in the industry would appreciate the impact they have had. You know, there's now absolutely a third player amongst them with Amazon. You know, what do we know about, you know, how agencies and marketers are working with these guys today, and just how big a role do they really play in the marketers' overall budget?
Yeah, this is a topic that is well and truly in the targets for just about everyone that's involved in the process. The Australian government's obviously investigating this heavily. I know the US governments are looking into this and making sure that the balance of power is right. But all the numbers that I've seen suggest that about 70% of digital ad spend goes to Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So quite a fair bit is your answer to that question. And then when you drill it down one step further and you look at total advertising budgets, agencies specifically, it's about 50 cents in every dollar gets spent with Facebook and Google. And I think it's easy to blame Facebook and Google for all the woes of traditional publishers. But I think what is clear through this is that marketers obviously receive a lot of ROI from these two products, because I think you would notice straight away that something wasn't delivering if you were spending more than 50% of your total marketing budget and it wasn't delivering results. The one thing that I look at both Google and Facebook through, though, is that neither of them can operate and deliver the products that they obviously want to deliver without content to share. And in fact, their platforms work best and are most effective for their users when the content is of a really high quality. And what that means to me, and then in the digital era, as more and more of it shifts digitally, the demand for content really has shifted from publishers to brands.
And if you take that into consideration and know that you're a marketer, you're probably going to want to know, if anyone can help you make your Google and Facebook marketing dollars go further, you want to hear from them, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's you can pinpoint two easy ways that you can help make their marketing spends work harder for them and be more effective. The first way of how you can help, and funny enough, through the use of quality content, is to increase their engagement on any of these platforms. And this could be anything from time on page to making the content more shareable, to having more credibility on it. But what's clear, whilst all these algorithms are very much under lock and key, they all tend to favor some sort of engagement metric, because the more time spent on the platform, the more time that these people are in their ecosystem, which is the more chance they've got to commercialize it. So I think if you can prove that your content delivers a greater engagement result there, then I think you'd be in a very good place. The second one is, and again through the use of quality content, is how you can make their spends work harder for them. The simplest way to look at this is through SEO via search engines. The more quality content that you have, the more likely you are to be found when your customer's looking, and in turn, you're more likely to solve their problem. And if you're as close as you can be to solving a customer's problem, then you're obviously more likely to convert and sell a product. On that note, just making sure you guys can see all this one, because I always like the little pictures of this study. You're particularly passionate about this study, Ben. So please explain, or can you explain, the significant object study and why it's always a favorite and resonates so well with the clients when you take it out?
Yeah, look, this study should be in every pitch that ever goes to any client who is thinking about doing written content, because we didn't know about this study when we launched the Fabulate business. Had we known about it, it would have been in every single deck that I was in market talking to agencies about. But and the reason why is it undoubtedly proves the value that expert storytelling from experienced journalists and creators can bring, and the value it can provide. So, this study was all about proving the hypothesis, or challenging the hypothesis, that if you can make an emotional connection through a story, can you transform an insignificant object into a significant one? And the way they went to prove this out was a guy by the name of Walker went onto eBay and purchased 200 insignificant objects. He spent no more than $129 on these 200 objects. And then he used his network of creators and journalists and asked them to write an engaging story for the item they were given. So there were 200 items, 200 engaging stories, and he was able to relist those items on eBay, with the only difference being that it now had the engaging story that went with it. And that $129 for those 200 items was $8,000 once those products were sold. So a 57 times increase on your investment, with the only difference being the storytelling that went with it. So that proves for me undoubtedly that the power of narrative, emotional storytelling that can go with products can make a real difference to the value a consumer will attach to any object that they're looking at. And, you know, to the point where, like, we've actually turned this into a product ourselves, where we can engage clients who have, you know, digital products and services online, and we offer offer the Fabulate service to them so that they can get expert storytellers telling their stories and adding value to the product and service that they're offering. Now, if anyone's interested in finding out more about this particular study, feel free. We'll share the details after. But there's a good TEDx talk on it, and it really it's definitely worth watching. And it really comes down to what I think are, you know, the reasons why, even in the first place, that marketers are looking to journalists for the skills that they have. And I think that, you know, from my experience, I think that the skill sets that journalists have can often be underrated by themselves, and the value that they can bring to marketers' content requirements. And so, you know, what we wanted to do here on this slide is call out 6 specific ones that we know clients and agencies are talking to us about, and value, and are reasons why they'll look to a professional journalist when creating branded content. And the first one is this inquisitive nature that journalists tend to have. And, you know, with all of you on the call, I'm sure you would recognize this in yourselves anyway, but this childlike curiosity that you have can be really infectious, and have marketers and business owners compelled to open up and share either their expertise or their ideas in a particular space. You know, they can feel heard. They can feel they can impart their knowledge to someone who cares and really wants to understand. And, you know, there's a real skill in that. The second one is being an experienced interviewer. You know, you as journalists, you're trained to, you know, there's a real art and trained to finding that poignant question that can create the perfect soundbite, or that can get to the nub of an issue or of a story, and really help bring that story to life. Your journalists are also fantastic storytellers. Journalists know how to engage audiences. They know how to take what can sometimes be really complex or even a dull idea and turn it into something that's engaging, informative, simple to understand. And, you know, that's of real value. You can also bring this neutral perspective. And I think a lot of people that work in their business day in and day out don't get to have this outsider's view looking in. And a journalist brings this neutral perspective that can be really valuable, because the things that often these marketers or business owners take for granted as standard is something that you can shine a light on and find a different angle for and turn into a compelling piece of content. You're also expert researchers. And so, you know, a lot of good response to, or pitches that we see even before the content is created, a lot of the time the best ones are already demonstrating they're experts in this space by the research that they have, the examples or previous work that they may have done in this category. And so, you know, showing your level of expertise through your research capabilities is another reason why marketers turn to professional, qualified journalists for branded content. And lastly, writing's what you do. You know, it's the reason why you guys are in business is because you're expert writers, which means you can do the tasks that internally would take them a really long time to do, and it's your craft, and so you're the expert at it. And the best examples I can think of with this is when we get requests from senior execs that are asked to have opinions and thought leadership content out there in market for their potential customers to engage with. But you ask a senior exec to sit down and write 800 words, it just doesn't happen. They don't have the time in their day to dedicate like this, you know, these large blocks of time to write this type of content. But what they can do is they can absolutely jump on a call and be interviewed for 10, 20 minutes by a journalist who can understand their tone of voice, who can pick up the thought leadership pieces and the bits of information that are important and turn it into something magical. And, you know, I think it's these combination of these 6 things that really make a journalist just stand out from the crowd when it comes to being able to bring a real level of expertise to branded content. And Nath, you know, we've talked about obviously the skill sets that these journalists are bringing to the table, but content generally, like why is it valuable for marketers? Because there's lots of places you could spend your money, right? Yep. So why are marketers spending money on content and not other mediums?
Yeah, we've touched a little bit on these throughout the presentation, but if you're all interested, and again, these are a lot of the things that we share and we cover on a regular basis. Here are some of the digital advertising theories that you can delve into to help make your sales pitch stronger. If I use the first one, banner blindness, Google that if you need a good read over a coffee this afternoon. But basically, it's the concept where advertising on the internet has become a lot like wallpaper, where people pay very little attention, if any at all. And there's some really great studies out there that do, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but website heat mapping, and it can show you the focus or the centralized areas of focus where people stop and they consume that web page at a group level. And it'll come as no surprise to anyone that very few people, if any, are actually looking at the ads themselves. It's the content that they're most interested in, and it's the content that they spend the most amount of time with. The other thing is the abundance of advertising that we're exposed to. So there was a really good study that was done a couple of years back, and I'd only imagine this would increase now as we're more and more connected and more devices at our disposal. But the average person sees between 4,000 and 10,000 ads in a day. And that means that eventually your brain starts to get exhausted and it starts to filter all of these messages out, ignoring them altogether, or just not having the mental capacity to be able to interpret it all. And what the research suggested is that dressing up your message in an engaging story gives it a greater chance of landing, and it also gives it a greater chance of being remembered. And then the last one, we joked about it before, but content does please the Google gods. Every piece of content that you create can add significant value over time to your business. And one of the things that I always have a little bit of a giggle about, that while each content piece is often judged on a one-off basis, or each individual article or each individual job that you do, you really need to be looking content, or clients really should be looking content like how you buy a house, and one that increases in value over time and over the long term.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. And whenever I'm in market speaking to clients and I go, can you tell us about your best performing piece of content? You know, very rarely is it something that they've done in the last few months. It's something that over time has just grown in desirability because Google keeps prioritizing it in the rankings. They keep sending large audiences there. And so often it's a piece that's 2 or 3 years old that has really increased in value over time. Very similar to, the property prices. So.
And we use a lot of these points to hone our sales pitch so that we've got those right proof points. But if you guys are anything like me, I've always approached pitching as really a necessary evil. And what I mean by that is you don't need to, or you don't have to love it, but it's something you just need to get comfortable with. And the more comfortable you are, the better you get at it, the less rejection stings when you're unsuccessful, those kinds of things. But when you look at point 1 on this slide, this is another old adage. You can see we start to love these. People decide with their heart and justify with their head. And ironically, a lot of the things that we see is that journalists are either too humble or too busy telling other people's stories to effectively tell the stories about themselves. And we get to see hundreds of briefs within our own platform. And the creators that take the time to introduce themselves to the client, to connect on a personal level, communicate them effectively, why they should and how they can help, and why they have the skills to actually assist their business are the ones that are more likely to convert. And I think those people that are going out of their way to show those tangible results, it just gives you an unfair advantage. And Ben, maybe this is something that you can speak to in more detail with your experience, but people obviously buy from people who they like and who they trust. But what are the tips that tips and hints that you have given to any one of the sales members that have been in your teams over the years to help and assist to build that rapport?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important point. And, it's when you have a relationship with someone, you'll always go the extra mile and be able to get that extra bit of information or find a way of trying to work together. And that's where the people-to-people thing comes into play. But one of the things that I've always really wanted sales teams that I've looked after in the past to buy into is they've got to believe in themselves and the ideas they're putting forward. Like, even if you think about the way that we introduced this presentation, like if we just started talking and we didn't give you our backgrounds, it would have been hard for you guys to accept some of the stuff that we're putting forward. But because we've had experience in that space, then you're more accepting of our suggestions and what we put forward. And you never really want to do it in a bragging way at all. But I think establishing a level of expertise in that space is really important. And then showing how passionate you are about that subject matter or about that category, about the idea that you're putting forward is absolutely the foundation to how you'll build trust with the client. The clients remember the meetings that they have or the ideas that they read or the pitches they see when they're challenged. And you can do that in a really respectful way. If you're the subject matter expert, or if you're great at what you do, or if you're passionate about your idea, then that can absolutely come across and you can give the client a perspective that they may not have had prior to reading your content or receiving your pitch. And that makes a huge difference. Yeah,
good points. The next point that we've put on this slide is that we affectionately call this Calibri 12 at Fabulate. And to give you an idea of what that means, it's the idea simplified to its most basic so that anyone, even really busy people, can get it and get it quickly. One of my favorite Mark Twainisms comes to mind here, where he famously said, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote you a long one." And by not taking that time to properly craft that message, you end up taking away and diluting from what you're trying to say. And if I look personally within myself on this one, this is something that I always personally need to keep myself in check on for. And the reason why I say that is I love big ideas and I love big solutions. But I also know that that's not the right code for how everybody likes to receive information. So you need to make sure that you're tailoring to the audience that's actually going to be receiving that so that it can land the greatest effect. So again, Ben, another one for you. Why do you think the best pitches are the simple ones? And is it actually possible to take complex ideas and make them easy to understand?
Yeah, I think you touched on a good thing there, Nathan, and it always reminds me of one of the things that I was taught growing up, which I had to unlearn when I moved into business, and that was your parents always tell you, treat others the way that you want to be treated. And really, when it comes to getting ideas across and getting cut through with any idea or pitch that you need to put in front of a person, it's actually you need to talk to people the way they want to be spoken to. And so it's really important to understand how does that person best receive the information? You know, are they a visual person? Are they an audio person? You know, what is it that you need to get across so that the message can be in a language that they're going to resonate best with them? But also always taking into account that, you know, if you can't make a complex idea simple, then it's going to make it hard for them to know that you're going to be able to write the content in a way that their audience needs to be able to understand it. And, you know, for me, when pitches can be simplified down to, you know, a bullet point type of summation, and you can get those complex ideas across in 1 or 2 paragraphs rather than a thesis, you know, you're more respectful of the time that they have. But 2, you've got a better chance of hitting the mark and then picking up on all your key points, because, you know, often these agency people that are, you know, looking through these pitches are looking through 5 or 6 different publishers or 5 or 6 different writers, and they're on a limited time frame, and so it needs to be something that they can pick up easily. They're never the one that is signing this off either. So if they can't then translate what you've written to the person who is signing this off, you know, then your chances of success also diminish. And so being able to simplify the message is really critical.
How proactive should you be with clients? And how do you tread that delicate balance between adding value and being annoying, or being a pest? Might be a better way.
Yeah. No one likes an annoying salesperson, or an annoying creator that's, you know, chasing every second. And so, you know, like I get that more than anyone. I've spent my career trying to get that balance right. And so I always tell my sales guys it's a combination of patience and persistence when trying to get a client across the line. You know, they're always going to be busy and there's always going to be lots on. And so you just need to make sure that you're staying top of mind as much as possible and walking that edge of being persistent without being annoying. And so always look at ways in which you can add value with each interaction that you have with them. And so, you know, if you have taken the time to really understand their business and their category, then you'll be surprised how easy it is for you to find things that you can share with them and stay top of mind. You know, like we wrote a piece about COVID when it was at the height of, you know, what hopefully is just round 1 and the final round. But, you know, that COVID piece was thought leadership, best practice around content marketing in these unprecedented times. So I was able to reach back out to all of our clients, no strings attached, with some useful information which I thought they'd find valuable. You know, and it's those types of interactions that I think builds rapport over time, builds those relationships, builds those trusts, and gives you a much better chance of winning business in the future.
One question that we get asked a lot is there a formula for pitching? What are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, look, I think that there should be a framework for pitching. I think you will always need to tweak it and add the right color and tone to suit the specific brief. But, you know, there is absolutely a framework for responding. You know, and I think if you can use that, one of the big advantages that you get is one, you're going to make sure you're covering off all the right points and you're demonstrating your level of expertise and why you are the right person for the job. But it also actually saves time in your day. You know, you don't want to spend all day pitching, because if you're pitching, then you're not creating the content and you're not getting paid. So I think it's really important to have a formula, because you can refine it, you can tweak it, you can look at the ones that you've won and the ones that you lost, and look at how you can improve that.
Cool.
And Nath, we've seen some good and some bad pitches over the years. So, love to hear your thoughts on, well, I guess we've got some examples coming up, haven't we, really, of what is what you would probably want to avoid when pitching. Where we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's jump into that.
So I went through the platform and I picked out 2 pitches for the same brief. We've obviously removed all the names and all that kind of stuff so that everyone feels comfortable with it. But just to give you an idea of the difference and trying to give you a little bit of a feeling at face value of what a client can potentially feel and see from the 2 different options. So I'll send the first one over and then you can analyze this for us.
So this was the one that actually got the client calling me, and they were in disbelief that this is something that the creator had actually put forward. And it was I'd like to think that it wouldn't happen again, but I just think that there are some people out there that just think, they've got this level of expertise and people should just appreciate that. And unfortunately, that's just not the way it works. Like, no matter how good you are at your craft, not everyone's going to know who you are all the time. And, if the client's taking the time to put a detailed brief out there in the platform or to you directly, not only is it courteous to put the same level of effort back in the pitch, it's really going to be detrimental if you don't. So, when being asked to give a little bit about yourself, and your opening line is, "I haven't got time to write long pitches," it's you can guess what the results are here. And then they, in the same breath as they're opening up and looking at all these pitches, they receive something like this. Now, this isn't necessarily about the length. It's much more about the effort and the consideration that went into this. And the idea was very clear. They had clearly taken the time to research and understand the brand and the product. They had given enough information in just one paragraph about themselves and their level of expertise in this space. The headline was attention grabbing, and the synopsis of how they would cover the content, while also taking into consideration everything that was in the brief and how it was going to be measured for success. All of that was able to be covered off and pitched on. And needless to say, who won out on this one. But they're just 2 really clear examples of what will work and what won't work. And this is the formula that we recommend, and the framework, I guess, that we would suggest when replying to any brief in the branded content space. And that first part is, this is really just trying to capture the a broad brushstroke of the idea. You need to demonstrate that you've read the brief, but you haven't just read the brief, that you've understood the brief and you understand the topic or the genre that they're asking you to cover. You've been able to identify what those problems are and the solution that you're going to be able to provide. You also want to be able to show you the right person for the job, right? They haven't met you before. They need to understand that you're passionate about this topic. They need to know that you've got experience in this area, that, what's your publishing history? Have you got, any unique skills that are really being called out for in the brief? And do you have any proof points? Have you got previous work? Have you got previous jobs or relevant clients that you've worked with that, can help really demonstrate your level of expertise? Bringing my idea to life, that's just a snappy, catchy potential headline that you want to put in there. And then, the the core idea or, the article synopsis itself doesn't need to be more than 50 to 100 words. You want to make it in, what we call Calibri 12. You want to make it simple, punchy, easy to understand, something that they could share and explain to someone else. And, if you can do all of that when you're responding to a pitch, you're dramatically going to increase your rate of success. That's something where we've seen time and time again. We've seen hundreds and hundreds of pitches go through the platform, and the ones that get this right have a much higher success rate. So, just before we close out, and, happy to take any questions, of course, but, what else can you do when pitching to help yourself? And it's one of the things, again, that I think, these points never get lost to me, no matter how many times I think about them, even for my own role. And, the first being just have more balls in the air. And what I mean by that is you want to have enough pitches out there so that you're not holding your breath on one, because nothing drives you crazier than if there's this one job that you're desperate to come off, and you're biting your fingernails off waiting. You need to keep yourself busy. You need to be doing enough pitching so that if one falls off, it doesn't matter. You want to really understand the value that you guys are bringing to the client, and we talked about that on the slide when we talked about the 6 areas that a journalist brings to any branded content brief. It also really helps to get buy-in from a client before you pitch. So, engage them, reach out to them, ask them some questions. If there's something that's missed in the brief, or if from the brief that you've received, you feel like you could do a better response if you had an answer to a question that, feel free to engage them. As soon as you start interacting with them, you're already building rapport, building trust by showing that you're going through the brief in detail and really trying to understand their problem. And then understand what the rules are that you're being measured against, and there's nothing wrong with getting up to speed with some of the phrases that marketers and agencies will use. Because if you use their language to pitch back to them, they're going to, again, think that you really understand what they need to decide upon in order to decide their winning pitch. And so knowing what you're being measured against is really important. Clients always appreciate and want to work with people that care as much about the business as they do, and that we see that come through in some pitches. And when you see that, you can, drop the mic, because that person's going to win the pitch. It's as simple as that. And so, look, just to summarize, and, I hope you guys have found today's session valuable, but, branded content, or, story sellers, which, the original story sellers that you guys all are, branded content's a big space, and it's growing at a rapid rate. So, as freelancers, I think the opportunity in market's huge for you guys. And, I'd be excited as a subject matter expert on any particular area, knowing how fast branded content's growing. The duopoly of Google and Facebook isn't going away anytime soon. So anytime you can speak to a marketer or an agency about how you can make those dollars work harder because of the quality content you can produce for them, they're going to want to listen. Journalists have these unique in-demand skills that, when delivered, deliver amazing results. And the last part, or point 4 here, is really develop that pitch formula that works for you, but don't be afraid to refine and to analyze those results. Whether it's a win or a loss, either can be valuable if you analyze it and look how to improve all the time. And, last but not least is just don't forget the value you guys are bringing to the brief. I know that you guys are always awesome at telling someone else's story, but people need to also know what your story is. And if they know that you love what you do, that infectious, energetic sort of feeling will come across in the pitches. And so lastly, just the Fabulate page, right? So, we told you who we were at the beginning, but we work with some of the largest publishing brands and media agencies in Australia. And, we go out of our way to make sure the rates that are on the platform are fair. They're above market averages. We make sure that any rate that is displayed before you pitch for the job anyway. So you've got that, you can make that decision before you ever choose to work or pitch for any work. And, one of the recent things that we've done just to, again, help clients in this space feel more comfortable about working with people for the first time is, any creator that wins a job on the Fabulate platform instantly is covered by our indemnity insurance as well. So that's just a recent addition. But guys, I really hope you found today useful and that you've got something from it. And, if you do have questions, you can either email Nathan and I after this, or you can ask us now. We're always available. So thank you.
Thank you. That was great. I'm sure there are some questions. I was asking Ben and Nathan before what would be the average amount of pitches that you're up against, and you said there was usually about 4 to 5.
Yeah, that's right. So we try and limit, I guess, the amount of quality creators we have on particular verticals until we have. So we want to try and grow the supply and the demand at the same rate, so that you're never up against 50 amazing storytellers. On average, you'll have 4 to 5 people pitching on any particular brief. And we call that out in the platform so that you can see for yourself how many journalists or creators have already pitched for a particular job.
Do you find there's an equal amount of people who've been journalists as well as people who are just generally freelance writers? Is there much difference between who's doing the pitches?
Nath, what do you reckon there?
I think a good branded content journalist will always, or a branded content writer will always have some sort of experience as a journalist. And I think they're all talented enough to be able to take that spin. Once you're comfortable with the fact that you're writing for a brand versus writing for a publisher, you're all talented enough to be able to actually to make that distinction. The one thing I would add there, though, is being comfortable with writing for brands, because it is different. There is an extra step that you usually need to go through. It's either a legal or it's some other comms department. But generally speaking, these clients are they're savvy enough now to know what works for audiences and what doesn't. So the number of advertorials are declining, which I think is good for everyone in the content space.
Do you find that once someone's written some branded content for a particular organisation, they come back to that same person?
Absolutely. We have 2 different ways in which a client can brief in the platform. So often if you're a first-time user needing content created, you would just default send it out to the marketplace, and the subject matter experts will be notified that there's a pitch that requires their skill sets in the platform for them to choose to submit or not. And the alternative to that is when you're putting your brief in the platform, you could choose just to send it to specific creators. So if there's people that you worked with before and that you trust and that understand your tone of voice and what you're trying to achieve, then we often find that on the 3rd or 4th time round, when a client's been in the platform and they're familiar with some of the creators, they'll just brief those ones directly.
And what if you don't have much of a portfolio built up? Have you got some suggestions for people who might like to write branded content but don't have a lot of experience or don't have much of a journalism background?
Look, I think you've got to start somewhere. Of course you do. So I appreciate that if you're new to the space, then you don't have to be just promoting the branded content that you've done. If you've got expertise on the editorial side, those branded content additional branded content elements can definitely be picked up pretty quickly. I think, if you look at what we called out before in terms of the reasons why journalists are being asked to work on branded content, it's the skill sets that are relevant, whether it's editorial or brand journalism, that a marketer is looking for. So you can share a portfolio of editorial content that you've written that is engaging and funny or emotionally driven, whatever it is that you want to put out there as examples of your work for clients to then come on and see what you're talking about.
I was thinking a lot of students who are graduating, don't have the experience. They're not hiring in newsrooms or anything. Is there a way that they could get involved with branded content?
Yeah, I think when you're at that level, I would always encourage you to be as entrepreneurial as possible, right? So start local and just, think about businesses in your area. Like the great thing about written word, it is the most economical way to get started in content marketing for any business. So it's very easy for a brand, a business to see the value that a well-written piece of content can deliver, and it doesn't take long for that value to be seen. So if you're a uni student or if you're just starting out, then our recommendation is absolutely start local, start with people that start with businesses that you visit regularly. Like, just keep an eye out on social media with who's active, who's publishing content that LinkedIn is a great place to start as well, to start making connections. For Fabulate, we don't have sort of like that sort of entry level creators in the platform today. You never know what our roadmap might unveil in the future, but right now is a level of expertise and experience you need to have to be on the Fabulate platform. But there's nothing stopping you if you're new to this, to just getting out there, being entrepreneurial. All of the tactics that we gave you today are absolutely applicable wherever you go.
I think the only thing I'd add to that point, Ben, is just demonstrate that you can engage an audience. I think ultimately that's what anyone that creates content is looking for. And if you can move people, then I think you're in a really good space to be able to proving the value that you'll offer.
Fantastic. Is there any other questions for Ben and Nathan? I know that it's been very insightful what you've been saying, and I've certainly learnt a lot over this past hour. I was just wondering if there was any more questions before we conclude the talk.
There is one in the chat just there. Gillian, I think this is an answer more specifically for you. But the question, the sign-up form on Fabulate, you've got to identify 2 primary content subject matter areas. That just helps us ensure that we get getting that supply and demand balance that Ben alluded to before. So I would just encourage you to sign up, pick 2 topics that you feel that you've most written for, and from that, once you're in the platform, you can obviously build out your own profile to pick more than just those 2 categories to find work for.
Yeah, so that is part of your profile in the platform. Once you're onboarded, you can select the various categories that you've written for or that you like to write about. Yep. No problems.
I was just thinking as you were talking then, if you are very successful at all the pitches, it's not automated, is it? There isn't a section that's suddenly automated that you'll come up as someone who is successful in that particular field. Like you haven't quite, it's not that kind of algorithm, is it, that you've got there? It's you pitching every single time, aren't you?
Well, unless a client chooses to award the job to you because they know who you are. But the first time round, if a client has put a brief out there, yeah, you'll be required to pitch to win it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Are there any more questions?
I have one.
Go for it.
Hey, Marcus.
Hey, guys. Hey, Nathan.
Hello.
A special day.
Maybe.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Not so much a question.
I like it, Marcus.
That's my question. Is it your birthday?
Yes, it is. Yes. Thank you for noticing.
A happy birthday. That's showing dedication coming onto a webinar when it's your birthday.
It's easy when it's something you're passionate about.
Exactly. And would you feel that there's plenty of work out there for someone to have be able to work full-time writing branded content?
Absolutely. Look, I think there isn't a brand in Australia that doesn't need a good story told. You know, the brands that are most successful in any category that they choose to operate in are the ones that you can tell the best stories. And so there's always a need for great storytellers. It's just being able to appreciate it's not easy finding the work or knowing who to talk to sometimes. Like Nathan and I talk about this, and it can be a frustration, but it's a necessary evil, and that is the media agencies control so much of the marketing dollars. And these media agencies are often, and the people that are making these decisions are people that are in their early 20s who are fresh out of uni, and they're putting together marketing plans for clients, and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend on campaigns, and they decide to make content part of the solution. And so finding that right 20-something at that right agency with the right client and is briefing right now can be hard to uncover. So it's not that the work's not out there. The work is absolutely out there. It's about being able to make the connections and find the work. But there's the industry itself is, premium branded content like what we're talking about is a $1.3 billion industry in Australia alone. About 40% of that 1.3 billion gets spent on content creation. 60% of it's spent on distribution. So paying publishers or Facebook or Google to get it out there. But there's still hundreds of millions of dollars every year that's spent on content, professional branded content, and about 55% of that is spent on the written word. So there's still hundreds of $millions just in the written word. So yeah, definitely I think there's a big opportunity for freelancers.
Oh, it's amazing. You always hear about this money out there, but it's good to know that it's floating around somewhere.
I've got a really easy answer to that one. The best way to get content marketing out there is to use content marketing. And it's something that we learned really early on as well. When we first started, it was something that we were a big believer in. So every day, it works out to be 10 o'clock every, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We don't post on Fridays, but we just go through and we work out what are the best places and the best types of content that engages with your audience. And eventually over time, people associate your brand with that content. And I think it's also a great way for you to build a portfolio, because if you can effectively tell your story, which should be the hardest story to tell of anyone's, I would argue that you could tell anyone's story.
Yeah, to that as well, what I would say is even the great thing about freelance and COVID sort of highlighted this to us is you guys as an industry, you're built for global pandemics. You didn't probably have that in your business plan when you decided to become a freelancer, but this is awesome. You guys can be anywhere and be writing great content, and you're not relying on going into, a 20-story building in order to get that content done or to do your business. And so it's if anything, I think it's been an even better environment right now. And I feel like it's exciting.
There's a question from Marcus as well about the Walker and Glen experiment. Is there a link? I think you said you were putting a link in there.
Yeah.
I'll find that now.
Nathan can share that. Yep, no problems at all.
Are there any more questions? That's been some really great information, actually. And you're right about the freelancing, like you can, and, remote working, whatever you want to call it, but it's a great time to be in that space, I think. There's lots of opportunities.
Yep, absolutely. Great.
All right, I think. Oh,
There you go,
Electrical
Nathan.
science. There we go.
Nathan's shared that now. So
Hopefully I've done that properly.
Yep.
Yep.
That's great. All right. Well, this has also been recorded, so I'll share this recording to participants so they can go back through those slides and have a look. And you've got your website up there. And yeah, I guess can they just email you directly if they have some questions?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. Ben and Nathan at Fabulate, whichever.
Okay, I'll put that in when I send out the recordings as well.
Thanks a lot.
So it sounds great. I hope to see all your names with content brand, like writing all your stories.
Yeah, well, we've written
me.
some great stories for the Freelance Festival. So
right.
We've got 4 of them about to be published. So watch your space, guys.
That's right. And if you didn't make it to the festival, then please, check back on our socials. And there's always information, always workshops running. There's another workshop running this Thursday on Are You Digitally Ready? So please go over to our website and have a look, or go to our socials on Facebook or Twitter, and you'll always see there's workshops coming up. So anyway, I'd like to thank Ben and Nathan for this very insightful webinar. It was really interesting, and there's so much I didn't really know about branded content, so thank you for illuminating that for us all.
Anytime.
Absolute pleasure. It's been great to spend some time with you guys.
All right, well, I'll let you go then. So thank you everybody for participating.
Thanks, guys.
And look forward to seeing you all again in the future.
See ya.
Thanks, Susan. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.